This will be our Thanksgiving quiz. Mark, you're free to make a new quiz, or you can continue as you will.
Well,
So
would you like to know the scores so far?
go on, tell us how you did for your Mid-Autumn Festival scores.
Well, actually, it's a dead heat. We've both got 3 points, so not
Very
bad,
nice.
not bad. Okay.
You are going to lose here. Because I know, first of all, I grew up in a place that did celebrate Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I
home
live in a place now
advantage.
that
Yeah.
does celebrate it, but that doesn't mean that many people here or there know very much about it. Um, but you would be very surprised, I think, by this.
Okay.
So it's okay to lose, but we're gonna learn something. So,
It's okay to lose. Yeah.
is Thanksgiving a pagan holiday?
By what definition?
Oh, very good, Mark. What do you mean? What do you mean, Mark?
Well, I what I mean to say is that not a it's not a church holiday.
Hmm.
Well, in terms of the Addams Family Values play that I've seen, where Wednesday burns the whole place down. Um,
And she has reason to do so.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And I would be happy to suggest that by bringing in people who had their own religion and spiritual beliefs,
Hmm.
that it could be seen as being a sort of an ecumenical, uh, non-Christian holiday and therefore pagan.
10 points for using the word ecumenical, Mark.
Thank
Uh,
you.
uh, it is pagan only if obviously if you are a member of the First Nations people.
Right.
There is
Okay.
no other way that it could be pagan.
No.
Mohawk Nation. There
Uh-huh.
is a tradition of, I apologize to my Mohawk friends because I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, which is Ohenton Kadawatenquen. Apologies if I said that wrong. It is a recitation of their Thanksgiving address, or meaning what we say before we do anything important.
Okay.
This ceremony acknowledges and recognizes the importance and relationship of all life force in creation, and the purpose is to bring minds of everybody together at a gathering together as one. There's also another festival called the Green Corn Ceremony, which is the first crop coming into ripeness of their corn. And depending on the year, there were many seasons for planting and harvesting for natives. They also moved seasonally to different places. So the concept of giving thanks for harvest is quite common across First Nations peoples, but where it happened and the time of the year that it happened varied. Okay.
Yeah.
So part two, is Thanksgiving a Christian holiday then?
Ooh, uh, it's not an old world Christian holiday, put it that way. Uh, I guess if you were of a particular persuasion, you might want to say it was it was when
What persuasion is that, Mark? What
if you
persuasion is it?
uh if you are uh if you consider it okay, if you just take the settlers, the people, the whatever they were called, the people with the buckles on their hats, apparently, um, and you admire their religious fervor and their reasons for settling in what became the US, then you could see it as a religious sort of um, starting point.
Very good. So the it's not a Christian holiday, but due to its associations with the Puritans,
Pilgrims,
yeah,
Puritans, yeah.
yeah, it has become thought of as a sort of Christian harvest holiday in some regions of the US.
Hmm.
Every household, every community has their own traditions. There is no one way to celebrate Thanksgiving. It is not a mass. It's not in the churches, but it is considered, if the Puritans did think of it as a religious rite.
Mm,
But because the
yeah.
Puritans did have regular fasts and feasts of gratitude whenever they wanted to thanking God for their hardship.
Hmm.
But they were certainly grateful to the native peoples who saved their lives.
So what
Uh,
you're saying is they had a lot to be thankful for.
you can't have that one. You already
That's
had a
that
good Hobbit one.
that's
That's it.
that's
No.
really clever. That's really clever. Hardship and plenty.
The best part of your puns is how we argue over them after, I think. So, speaking of the Puritans, Mark,
Yep.
who were the first to celebrate Thanksgiving in North America? I know I could smell every American getting huffy already, going, but
I,
who were the
I,
first
I
recorded to
I don't
celebrate Thanksgiving in North America?
I don't
That
really
are not,
see.
excuse me, that are not native peoples. I mean, talking specifically about settlers and Puritans.
Oh, so is this like a Dutch or English thing?
Is it?
Is this what basically I don't see why this could possibly be controversial. Um, but no, but obviously, as you said, I'm going to lose this round. So that's but uh I don't know. I mean, how I don't actually know what you're asking me, if you see what I mean.
So
Because like,
the
so
legend,
what I would say would be European settlers, I guess.
okay, very interesting non-answer. So
Yeah.
the legend is that it was the settlers of Plymouth Rock. This is
Right.
disputed. Okay.
Okay.
So technically, and if we're just talking about North America,
Hmm.
Sir Martin Frobisher, Canada, and his crew were credited as the first Europeans to celebrate a Thanksgiving ceremony in North America in 1578.
Hmm.
So Sir Martin Frobisher, they celebrated Thanksgiving ceremony in 1578. They were followed by the inhabitants of New France under Samuel Champlain in 1606. Now, these are not
Okay.
Puritans, these people, but they were here and they did have a Thanksgiving ceremony that that they survived the end of the year here.
Hmm.
So, historian Michael Gannon argues that the first Thanksgiving celebration in North America was the 8th of September, 1565.
Wow.
Following a religious service, Spaniards shared a communal meal with the local natives in Florida. In any case, I mean, it was whatever it is, it's the people of Plymouth Rock, which was 1612, and the people of Jamestown. Both of them
Hmm.
are credited as some of the first.
Hmm.
It's not them. But I was growing up, we learned that it was the people of Plymouth Rock. 1621 was when the English pilgrims, oh, sorry, 1621, English Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts shared the meal with the Native American neighbors. On
Hmm.
September 16th, 1619, the good ship Margaret settlers commissioned to 8,000 acres, 30 miles west of Jamestown in the James River. They celebrated there as well. The land was given to the Virginia Company by King James. You know the song, Mark? In 1607, we sailed the open sea for glory, God, and gold, and the Virginia Company. No? Aw,
No.
come on. December 4th, this was the Berkeley Plantation. December 4th,
Uh-huh.
1619, was again another before before the people of Plymouth Rock. Sorry, it was
But
1621, not 1612. Yeah.
but what you're describing there is
Mm.
people arguing about Thanksgiving ceremonies.
And this is
Whereas
why
obviously the
personally,
Thanksgiving that
yes.
everyone learns about is the one that the holiday presumably is based on, isn't it?
And what is that one, Mark? We're going to get to that. So
Okay.
this is why I personally, because people are like, what's the first? What's the first? Everybody always says, oh, it's Plymouth Rock. It is
Yeah.
absolutely not Plymouth Rock.
Hmm.
Yes, that was when the Pilgrims sat down with the Wampanoag natives who saved their lives. But again, there's a whole Wampanoag backstory there. There's a whole native backstory. Wampanoags were fighting with other native tribes at the time. Settlers were coming, making things difficult, etc. We're gonna get to that whole story in just a second.
Okay.
But so in general, there is a lot. So there's the date of 1578,
Mm-hmm.
1565, which
Mm-hmm.
again, that's the one that people say now is the first one. Um, then there's 1619 that could be possible, but 1621 is the one that everybody learns about. And that is the one that where you see the buckle hats, the buckle shoes, all the pilgrims sitting down to the feast. So there
Me. It's
and
Turkey
that is,
Day. Yeah.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yes, exactly. So that's the one that M's Family Values is
yeah,
ragging on, is that
yeah.
one. And it's not that one. And
No.
so rightly so, as you say, what then denotes the official Thanksgiving? And that is true. And I do agree with you that I controversially say that none of these are the first Thanksgiving. None of them. Because it's not the official holiday. It's not, it is a recorded feast at this time of the year, around this time of the year, when people gave thanks, but it was for different things.
Yeah.
And so it's not it is a myth, or I should say
Mm-hmm.
myth, it
Mm-hmm.
is a
Mm-hmm.
legend that was then translated over
Yeah.
to this time of the year,
Okay.
where they're like, oh yes, the people of Plymouth Rock, they came, and then the natives taught them how to farm. And that is a little bit of a fib that we learn in school, because the
Mm.
real story is much much more difficult. It wasn't around November, which is when
Mm.
Americans celebrate that. So I controversially say that none of these. But so you asked before, you're like, why should this cause controversy? Because it's now the difference between, was it first celebrated in Massachusetts? Was it first celebrated in Florida? Was it first celebrated in Canada, etc.? So now there's a whole rivalry and a war over where this quote unquote first Thanksgiving actually happened. And
I,
why would it matter, Mark, if it was in the North or the South? Why would it matter?
So is that the next question, or you just
Yes.
like, um
So next question is, when is Thanksgiving actually?
uh sorry, you completely thrown me with the North and South. That all that came into my head was the was it Apu in The Simpsons passing his American citizenship test? And he's like, well, the cause of the Civil War was very complex. It was economic factors, and the guy just says, just say slavery. um, that's why it would matter. When is sorry, what was it? When is
When
Thanksgiving?
is Thanksgiving?
When is it?
Hmm.
Uh, Thanksgiving is the friends we made along the way.
Yes, I do agree. Friendsgiving
Yes.
is now widely celebrated,
Mm.
especially in England, actually, with so many American expats.
It is actually, yeah.
Yeah, Friendsgiving, yeah. The first
I don't know.
official,
Yeah.
the first official annual Thanksgiving, at least in Canada, was
Uh-huh.
celebrated November 6th, 1879. And I mention this because it is not in November in Canada anymore. Um,
Ha, 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 again, I'm ignorant of this. Has it moved to be aligned with the US or
no, and that's what
no?
we'll get to. So the
Okay.
first Thanksgiving after Confederation was observed April 5th, 1872. National
Okay.
civic holiday, rather than a religious one. And it was held to celebrate the recovery of the Prince of Wales from an illness in Canada. Thanksgiving was first observed as an annual event in Canada, like I said, November 6th, 1879. But beginning in 1921, Thanksgiving and Armistice Day, which was introduced in 1919, were celebrated on the same day, the first Monday of the week of November, or the week of the 11th of November. That's our
Yeah, yeah.
Armistice Day.
Hmm.
In order to give more recognition to veterans, however, November 11th was kept as Remembrance Day
Hmm.
and was made a holiday in 1931. Thanksgiving was again proclaimed annually and typically observed on the second Monday of October, which is where it is now. But
Okay.
it was not until the 31st of January in 1957 that Canadian Parliament proclaimed the observance of the second Monday in October was a day of general thanksgiving to the Almighty God for the bountiful harvest which Canada has been blessed. Again, no mention of natives in this, unfortunately. So here in Quebec, and this is why I say it really depends where you live, because here in Quebec it's called Action de Grâce, and it is barely celebrated, but not for the reason that you might think. It's not celebrated because Quebecois government originally, not now, but originally saw this as a Protestant holiday. And
Ah,
Quebec
okay.
traditionally, really up until the 70s, was Catholic.
Mm,
So they didn't celebrate it at all. They
mm.
saw it as a Protestant and a British holiday and decided not to participate.
We say
Uh,
no,
on
no.
dit non. In the US, Thanksgiving did not become a national holiday until 1863. And this is why I say in our previous question, I
Mm,
say it's none of them because
yeah.
it wasn't a national holiday until 1863 when novelist and magazine editor Sarah Josepha Hale succeeded in convincing Abraham Lincoln to make Thanksgiving a national holiday on the last Thursday in November after nearly 20 years spent advocating for the cause. The original American Thanksgiving was celebrated October 3rd, but in 1939, with the last Thursday in November falling on the last day of the month, it was Franklin D. Roosevelt who decided to lengthen, quote unquote, lengthen the Christmas shopping season by moving. He made a presidential proclamation and moved Thanksgiving to the second to last Thursday of November.
Okay. And
Uh,
that was purely for to
yeah.
give the
And now
economy
we
a
have Black
boost.
Friday, the real
Right.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Um,
That the opening scene in the movie Krampus is just a thing of beauty. Just all these slow-mo people just crunching over each other to get hold of, electronic goods.
yep.
Yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
but again, but so that's why I always laugh at it because Thanksgiving in the States, I mean, since 1939, has never been about Thanksgiving. It's always been about shopping for Christmas. I
Yeah.
mentioned that Sarah J. Hale and I mentioned Abraham Lincoln in 1863 because the American North and South celebrated Thanksgiving at different times.
Oh,
At first, the South did not, because the proclamation was made by Abe Lincoln, the South did not want to celebrate it at all, calling it
no.
a damned Yankee holiday. Henry
Mm,
Wise, the pro-slavery governor of Virginia, thought Hale was championing a Yankee holiday and a theatrical national claptrap of Thanksgiving. I'm using air quotes, which has aided and other causes and in settling thousands of pulpits to preaching to what he claimed Christian politics.
yeah.
So the South, many states in the South refused to celebrate it, thinking that it was more of a sort of a celebratory holiday for winning the war rather than any kind of
Yeah.
Christian thing.
Mm. And is this when people started to buy and light Yankee candles? I'm
They're
ashamed of
actually really
myself.
good, and we can't get them here in
Yeah.
Canada. We used to have a friend who would go down and get Yankee candles. And they're huge. My God,
Yeah.
they're big.
Well, have you seen the Franken candle?
No,
That
what's this one?
oh, is it
Is it all the candles just put together?
yeah, Safia Nygaard. She does lots of Franken stuff, but like Franken lipsticks and Franken
Hmm.
sweets. But yeah, Franken candle. They made us. I think it was like a 5 foot candle of all the Yankee candles, and obviously they always come out brown. These mixtures. Um,
Well, to be fair,
but
the original bees wax candles are either quite yellow or quite brown, depending on the
yeah,
part of
mm,
the hive.
yeah,
So, but
and
yeah,
smelling of berries as well. Yeah, yeah, brown and berries. Mm,
smells like wasted money.
yeah.
Um, Next question.
Uh-huh.
We talked about when Thanksgiving was. We talked about what the first Thanksgiving might have been. But what is Thanksgiving actually celebrating?
Oh, and we're talking about the 1861 Thanksgiving.
Are we?
I'm
1863. Yeah.
63. Okay, 1863 Thanksgiving. Is it celebrating sort of national unity?
Nowadays, I mean, it celebrates capitalism. So in the
Yeah.
beginning of Advent in the States, it was really, if you want to go by the 1600s one, it was originally about the colonists not starving to death.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so
yeah.
the first permanent English colony in North America was Jamestown, and it had experienced the starvation time from around 1609, 1610.
Mhm.
Um, and accusations and denials started popping up as early as the 1620s. Became clear that everybody was starving, and that the it's possible that the colonists were cannibalizing people and eating each other just to survive, because that first winter, over half of them died.
And eating
Uh,
shoes as well, I seem to recall.
uh, maybe on the
Apparently.
maybe on the Franklin expedition, surely.
Yeah.
No
No,
relation.
no, no, no. On
In the
the
colony,
yeah, yeah, there was a guy who came over who was a cobbler, and he came with a huge collection of shoes because he figured that people would want and need shoes. Um
they did, just not in the
and they
way
ended
that
up
he thought they would.
eating his shoes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can't
If
remember
you
which
don't
town it
eat your
was though.
shoes, I'll eat my hat. Those who came over, well, it's interesting because those who came over in the Mayflower, they actually stayed on their ship the first winter because they didn't know how to do any crops. Because remember, the natives didn't have plow farming
Yeah.
at that time. So over half of them died in the winter, and they would not have survived without the Wampanoag people. Historian Christopher Heaney explains that upon the arrival in New England, English colonists found mounds of sand filled with mats, pots, and Wampanoag weaponry, but said that they stopped digging once they realized that they had unearthed a native graveyard.
Mm,
This admission was a half-truth
mm,
because, in fact, the colonists kept digging once they discovered some graves were filled with maize.
mm,
For this bounty of native baskets filled with corn, Bradford thanked the special providence of God. The Christians' theft of this corn, seed to plant them corn for the next year, meant they would be able to avoid starvation, but of course they desecrated the graves. About 102 colonists died that year. And in the ensuing years remained extremely difficult. In 1623, for example, one unfortunate fellow who set out to gather shellfish during the cold months, he froze to death and he got stuck in place and died there, and nobody went to fetch him. Uh, Important assistance finally arrived in March of 1621 in the form of Wampanoag aid. Colonists and Native Americans had seen each other at various points throughout the winter, but they didn't really have much contact. In some cases, they exchanged shots. Apparently, that was recorded, but had avoided closer contact up until March of 1621. The English signed a treaty with the Massasoit, Sachem of the Pokanoket Wampanoags. Again, apologies for my native pronunciation. Um, the two groups agreed to mutually aid each other, setting the English on course for conflict with their rivals, the Narragansetts and Massachusetts peoples who were there. So
oh,
really,
and the,
this was sort of like they agreed to help them, and it was kind
yeah.
of like a native civil war, unfortunately.
Well, and
Uh,
this is something that the English are particularly good at is getting into wars based on paperwork. You know, I think you'll find that I think you'll this piece of paper here says, right, we're
Clearly
gonna,
says.
yeah, clearly, yeah, yeah, they're very good at
I think you'll find that my king says you should be dead by now.
that.
Please carry yourselves off. Thank you. Um,
Ugh.
I know it's it
So,
is.
sorry,
Mhm,
so just before you carry on, I've got a question about what you've just been saying.
mhm,
Um, and this is a serious question. It may sound like a joke. I'm not joking.
mhm.
Um, did the people arriving on these boats, presumably for the most part for political and or religious reasons, or religious and or political, did they honestly not know how to farm?
That is a wonderful question, and many people have asked this. So, for example, Jamestown Colony.
Hmm.
So if we're talking about Canada, the people who did come here, I think it was 1507
Hmm.
was John Cabot. He came on an exploratory expedition,
Yeah.
and he was fine. He made it I think he made it back and forth a couple times.
Hmm.
When they finally did come and they settled in St. John's, yeah, they had people who knew what they were doing. They had really people who knew how to fish, really. There
Yeah.
were the Mi'kmaq peoples who they met there. Again, there was a bit of tension, but they sort of stayed out of each other's way. There were also Basque people who came to that region for the oil and fisheries.
Hmm.
And again, people kind of stayed out of each other's way. It was the French and the Iroquois who really started tussling a bit. I think it was for quite a while. And then things
Right.
settled down and then they established Hudson Bay, right? Hudson Bay Company.
Mm. Mm.
Those people, I mean, winters were still rough, but those people seemed to have been okay. There were people who obviously who did die. Like we
Hmm.
said, especially Franklin Expedition, they all died on that one. That was a disaster, one of the greatest disasters of
No
early
relation.
Canadian history. No relation at all.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
song though. So they didn't do well.
Mm.
That is always a question though when it comes to, you have to understand something though. These people were used to British weather, British crops, British weather.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they did know how to, some of them did know how to farm,
Hmm.
especially the people who did the Jamestown colony, also the Berkeley plantation as well, because
Mm.
you have 8,000 acres of land. What are you going to do with it if not farming?
Yeah.
But they were used to plow farming. Natives did not have plow farming at the time.
Mm.
And they had their own crops, obviously, the classic Three Sisters,
Hmm.
whereas American, well, people who became Americans
Hmm.
didn't. They had other methods of planting and farming. They knew
Mm.
how to forage, but I don't think that they were prepared for just how cold, especially Plymouth, I would say. Probably they showed up and they went, "Oh, we fucked up,"
Well, and
because
and
it's
that
cold up there in the
yeah,
winter.
and that's kind of my yeah. This is what
That
I'm
is a
fascinated
wonderful
by.
question, though.
Yeah,
I think
because it
they were just not prepared. That's all.
yeah, and that's sort of the impression that I get. But it's a very believable state of affairs because they live. My understanding is they spent a long time raising money for an expedition, as it were,
Mm.
and getting ready to go.
Yes, they did
But
not. They did not. The Plymouth people did not go to Plymouth immediately. They went to several places in and around
yeah.
England
Mm.
before they left. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
But I can well imagine that the idea of a utopia across the sea
It was not
was
Massachusetts.
with such a draw that you may not think actually what if the weather is different, what if we miss, for example, the planting time of year and we have to get through a winter without any crops before we can, I can understand how, because you're so caught up in the, I guess, the just getting to the boat, getting the money for the boat, getting but also as well every now and then having a meeting and singing together. So
Well,
yeah, it's just
think about it.
interesting.
So Jamestown expedition landed in Virginia. Now, Virginia can get cold also,
Yeah.
but that weather is not New England.
No.
New
No.
England weather is atrocious.
Mm.
I grew up, I grew up there, and let me
Hmm.
tell you, oh my God, the humidity and the it will eat through your bones. Even if, I mean, Canada here, we get -20 sometimes. Yes, it can be very cold, but a lot of the time that is dry cold. It's not necessarily too humid
Hmm.
in the winter
Hmm.
sometimes. Um, I just think that the people the Plymouth Rock folks who died horribly that first winter, who just stayed on their ship that first
Mm.
winter, I
Mm.
don't think they were prepared for this. And I think
No.
they just didn't know what to do, whether they're like, should we risk going back
Mm.
or should we just tough
And
it
before you
out
know it, you're
here?
stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose actually thinking about it, so there's early formal archaeologist as opposed to just mere antiquarian,
Hmm.
um, called John Lubbock, who did a lot of work sort of on what's called sort of mid-range archaeology. So taking how people live in contemporary times and mapping it back onto stuff that we find in the archaeological record. And more often than not, it's not a direct one for one, but it can give you a hint as to why it is that people were doing certain things in certain ways in the past. And one of the observations that he made amongst the Inuit,
Hmm.
because he was trying to understand some of the Mesolithic material that was turning up in Northern Europe. was to simple things like having a cold air sink in your front door. So just having a little drop where the cold air sits as you go in. He admired that and found that to be very, an ingenious use of architecture, which presumably, yeah, if you're from Plymouth, if you're relatively urban, I guess as well, if you're used to a lot of that stuff, you're not going to think you're going to have a lintel to your door. You're not going to have uh, just simple preparations for what the weather can do to you.
Not
Yeah.
only that, but I mean, you think about
Mm,
northern peoples and how they lived. Yes, they
yeah.
know how to they know how to survive a winter. They understood that snow can be insulating. And so
Yeah.
they made
Yeah.
things like igloos, and it was fine
Mm,
for them. They
mm,
also knew how to hunt for things like seal,
mm,
which they still eat today, of course.
mm,
And they knew how to survive in a harsh environment. They had been doing it since antiquity. Whereas
mm.
if you have somebody, who comes over from England and goes, "Oh, why are there no broad beans here? I don't know what to do." Looking at the fare that they have been presented with and go, "You couldn't tell what it was."
Yeah. Oh, foreign muck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Um,
I don't have my beans on toast. I don't know
no,
what to
no.
do.
And I suppose even just to go back to your point
Oh, like God,
about
that's so British, isn't it? Like, could you imagine the people on Plymouth Rock coming over and going, "Oh, we're all gonna die because we don't have beans on toast."
yeah, got no brown sauce at all. What are we meant to
Oh
do?
no,
Yeah,
that's what happened, isn't it, Mark? That's what
yeah. There was no brown
happened.
sauce. Yeah, the HP was gone. But back to your point about the East Coast to this day. I mean, for example, the winters, even in an urban environment like Manhattan,
Oh,
can
the worst.
get very deeply snowy. And that can be dangerous, and that's people with buildings to live in. And established heating and so on and so forth.
There is a wonderful, I mean, one of my favorite books is called The Witch of Blackbird Pond, and it's all about, it's a very famous book. It's about a colony in
Hmm.
states and a Puritan colony and how they accuse this one poor old Catholic lady of being a witch. But really, it's about their time and about their time in the colonies and how absolutely brutal their winters here were and how
Mm.
absolutely miserable they all were. And so they just decide to blame their problems on somebody else. We have two more questions.
Okay.
And so this one is a bit contentious because
Yep.
we do hear this. Another myth that I heard a lot when I was a kid is, was Thanksgiving linked to the Powhatan massacre?
Uh, I don't know what that is. So, but
No, it was
it
not.
but, no, but it sounds bad though. So,
It was a famous massacre of 1622. So essentially
oh,
the story of John Smith and Pocahontas. Um,
oh,
yes.
okay.
It took place in the English colony of Virginia on April 1st, 1622. English explorer John Smith, yes, that one. Um, he was not an eyewitness though, but he
Right.
did write in his History of Virginia that warriors of the Powhatan people came unarmed into the houses with deer, turkey, fish, fruit, and other provisions to sell us. That he did write about that, but it had nothing to do with Thanksgiving. And then the conflict happened after that. What was eaten at the first Thanksgiving?
What was eaten? Yams,
Oh, that's interesting. Um,
not turkey.
oh, well, venison probably.
Okay.
Squanto, who was one of the natives who approached the settlers to broker peace, uh, he saw that they were starving and he hunted deer for them because that's what they
Uh-huh.
did. Uh, Turkey was possibly there because obviously it is a bird that is the wild turkey is native to the area.
Okay.
But unlike what some people say, the turkey had nothing to do with old rites or rituals. It was eventually chosen by Ben Franklin, also no relation, because it was an indigenous bird. That's it. While the
Right.
celebrants might have well feasted on wild turkey, the local diet also included fish, eels, shellfish, and a Wampanoag dish called nasaopum, sorry again if I mispronounced that, which the pilgrims adopted. It's boiled cornmeal mixed with vegetables and meat. Uh,
Okay.
there were no potatoes, of
Right.
course,
Yes. Yes.
because that is a South American thing.
Yep.
And it hadn't been introduced into the global food system, and no pies because there was no butter, wheat flour, or sugar yet at the time. I love how
Right.
you're like, no pies.
Yeah.
Like the no potatoes, you're like, yeah, fine. No pies.
Do you know?
I could just see like your brain melting.
Well, before we look at the scores, which I'm pleasantly surprised by, uh, I will say that going off what we were talking about earlier with Michaelmas, etc., the spring term Epiphany.
Hmm.
That's what it was called. It was called Epiphany. So so there you go. I had an epiphany, and it was.
And it was that.
It was, yes. So actually, you said I was going to lose this round, and I did.
Oh,
But only
good.
by 1 point.
Not bad.
So 4 points to three. So not too bad at all, really. Not too bad. Yeah. But yes, lots. There's more to learn about there. I do feel um, as though what we sort of pick up here is basically through pop culture
Hmm.
tends to be the most sort of vanilla-y, um, yeah, sort of, buckles on hats and and everyone lived happily ever after kind of storytelling around Thanksgiving.
Well, I mean, luckily,
Yeah.
so nowadays, especially here in Canada, we do have a Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is now it's around this
Okay.
time,
Hmm.
which does honor Native peoples instead
Interesting.
of the usual stuff. And we still keep our Thanksgiving because again, our Thanksgiving is different. The history of our Thanksgiving is very different from the history as it in the States. Like we said, a
Hmm.
lot of the nowadays the real quote unquote Thanksgiving in the
Mm.
States is linked with the Civil War and with Abraham Lincoln.
Mm.
So that's a different thing. And we had, I mean, we had the War of 1812 with the States, but our Thanksgiving tradition doesn't come from that.
No.
Our Thanksgiving tradition really does come from, again, the same thing of people coming here, them not dying. Essentially, the history of Thanksgiving is we came over here and we didn't die. Yay!
We came, we saw, we didn't die.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
very
much.
good. Very good.
So,
Interesting.
so
And and
what's the
and
score?
yeah, well, the score is 4 to you and 3 to me on Thanksgiving. So yeah, I think that's okay. Not too bad. Uh, and I guess I've been interested by as ever by these uh seasonal quizzes. Presumably next time it's the biggie, is it?
It is the biggest. Well, the biggie for us was Christmas. That's what we started with.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
we
Well,
we
well,
should we should do a review, however,
yeah.
because we didn't. There are certain things that we didn't talk about, like the
Okay.
wild hunt. But the second biggie is Halloween.
Okay. Cool.
That's the next one. So tune
Very
in
good.
for that one.
Yeah.
And we will be talking about the history of Halloween, Samhain, All Souls Day, and All Saints Day, and Dia de los Muertos, and everything in between. So tune in for
And
that
Sam
one.
Hain.
Get out, Mark. Get out. I'm ending this now. Goodbye.